Hi everybody, it's me Tami DeVine here on CCN Sunrise. With me today is Dr. Robert C. Newman II. We'll call him Dr. Newman. Thank you so much for being here today. You were a candidate for governor.
Yes.
Why did you feel it was important to run?
First of all, and we'll move more into this later, it actually is a God call. I didn't look at it and say it's time, things are bad enough, that somebody needs to rescue California. That was not my position. I think we need a godly basis for running this state, and for that reason, and being biblically oriented in terms of how to do things, that I decided that it was time to apply those principles to government.
Okay, so some people might say, well, if God called you to be governor, but you lost in the primary, how can that be?
God works in strange ways.
Yes, He does.
Somebody might have said that prior to me making that statement.
I think so.
But there is another election, 2022.
Okay.
So people will have another opportunity to wake up and make a reasoned decision about a candidate, rather than basing it on emotion or how one combs one's hair, based on principle, record, and sound reasoning.
Okay, well, you wrote a book. This is My Journey, My Stand, and here you talk about that call to run for governor, and you talk about some of your stances, I think, your beliefs, your Christianity, and you apply that, your Christianity, to your candidacy, to the platforms that you ran on for governor, including being pro-life. Is that right?
That is correct.
So a lot of people are like, there should be separation between church and state. You cannot use your Christianity to run, you know, and to be in charge of government. How do you reply to that?
I reply by saying that there is religion as people define religion. That is the practice on certain days of the week. My belief in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior is who I am, even here as we sit together. It is 24/7. It's not relegated to a particular form of worship or a particular day of the week. And so I apply those principles that I have learned in reading the Bible to my daily life, to my relationships, to my emphasis in life.
And part of your belief for being pro-life is also rooted in Christianity, is that right?
Well, certainly that's right, but it's also rooted in my background. My bachelor's degrees are in chemistry and in zoology. And I know genetics, and I know cell biology, and I know that DNA could only be a human being, and that life begins at conception. But I am not just pro-life in the sense of dealing with the developing embryo, but also throughout life, sanctity of life, that we must have a reverence for the elderly and their contribution to life. We can't just say they've outlived their usefulness and we need to get rid of them.
So life from the cradle to the grave, pretty much, or before the grave.
Before the grave, yes.
Before the cradle and before the grave. Having a sanctity of life, then, that people have that throughout. Okay. Do you think that being pro-life like that, especially in a state like California, do you think that could work? I mean, because there are so many people who make California blue, who don't believe these things, who are for abortion and even late-term abortion.
I do understand that that's running rampant in California, and I think that we as citizens of the state of California suffer greatly because of bad decisions. You see, as far as I'm concerned, those who made those decisions in the legislature were not terminated in the womb.
Very true.
And so they need to look at that there's a reason, and I think it's a God-given reason, why those of us who survived that ordeal, which was not in place when I was a child, need to realize that life is precious.
Okay.
It's ordained of God.
Let's go back to your candidacy. You did not continue on. John Cox, you ran as a Republican, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so John Cox got the Republican nomination during the primaries in June, and but you went through the process, and you had some major issues, from what I understand, with the process of being a candidate. Can you talk about one or two of those problems you had?
The reason I've brought this documentation with me.
Look at this big binder.
This actually is one of 3 binders that the Secretary of State's office provides for candidates at an expense beyond the nomination expenses, a few $1,000s, and beyond the expense to have one's candidate statement in the statewide literature, which costs the candidate $25 per word.
Wow.
And we pay for that as well. We file papers on a regular basis with the Secretary of State's office that have no value for the candidate whatsoever and are just a great expenditure of time. In the previous election, filed, because I've been a candidate for governor of the state of California on other elections, that I was fined $1,154 for filing papers late. There was no wrongdoing, an audit, everything, money received, money spent, etc., was entirely according to the rules. I filed some papers late. Well, I didn't, my accountant did, so I was fined for filing them late.
Wow.
That's what the Secretary of State's office does, of no value to the candidate and no value to the voters.
Some people might say, well, it might weed out the less serious ones. What do you think about that?
That's part of the strategy, I truly believe, but a candidate has no idea what he or she is going to be dealing with as a candidate in relation to the Secretary of State's office and the Fair Political Practices Commission. They have no idea what they're dealing with. They have no idea what they're dealing with the 58 counties who all have a registrar of voters and an office representing the voters and other factors. And that brings me to another point that I'd like to share, just by way of education, since I'm emphatic about education and people being informed when they vote, that the counties are to provide for the candidate a copy of the sample ballot in that county to demonstrate that the candidate is actually on the ballot. Only 8 of them out of 58 sent the required documentation to this candidate and did not provide that information to many of the other statewide candidates.
Only 8 out of 58 registrar's offices sent you the documentation that you pay for to receive.
Correct. That's correct.
Wow.
That I was supposed to receive prior to the 5th of last month, voting
wow.
day. And that's, but you see...
So do you get your money back? I mean, you should get some money back from them, right?
A refund. Yes, a refund. But the other, there's a really, my wife loves this story. When I pulled my papers, that's the term, and got sworn in, I didn't need proof of citizenship, I didn't need a driver's license, and I didn't need a marriage certificate to indicate that I am for real. I did not need those documents to indicate that I was a candidate for governor and run in the race.
Wow.
But the other part of it is they required a check that approximated $4,000 to be filed with the Secretary of State, a blank check, not to exceed a particular amount. A blank check.
Wow.
And they never even have the courtesy to notify the candidate about the amount of that final bill.
Wow.
Because you see, when we secure signatures in lieu of the filing fee, we don't exactly know that amount. Because again, the registrar of voters in the 58 counties have not provided the information to the candidate how many qualified signatures they've actually received.
So you might wake up one day and check your bank statement and surprise, it's a lot bigger of a check than what you anticipated writing, huh?
And there's no way to even verify the accuracy of that amount.
Wow.
Because again, there's no real concern about the candidate in most of the ROV offices, Registrar of Voters offices.
So what are you going to do about it, Dr. Newman? Bad things are happening with this.
I'm going to complain on various radio and television programs. We need a qualified, concerned Secretary of State who is not only concerned about the candidate, but also about the voters.
Who do you think that will be? Because we have an election in November.
That is correct. There is no question about who needs to be out and that Mark Musser needs to be in as the Secretary of State.
You think he could do a better job than Alex Padilla right now?
Well, I wouldn't have mentioned that second name, but I also know him, but far better, far better. Here's the illustration. In San Diego County, in the previous election, when our glorious president, what's his name? Donald Trump, when he was elected, 133% of the registered voters in San Diego County voted. 133%. How do you account that?
Yeah, it can't go over 100. It's not supposed to anyway, right?
And when only about 50% of the voters vote anyway. LA County, is West Covina in LA County?
Yes.
That's correct. You know your geography.
Yes, sir. A little bit.
144% of the registered voters voted in that same election. 144%. There were 11 counties in California out of the 58 who exceeded 100%.
Okay, so
exceeded 100%. And Alex Padilla says everything is just fine in the Secretary of State's office, which oversees the ROVs, and everything is just fine in the ROV offices.
All right.
And that is just not so. So, Election Integrity has filed suit against the Secretary of State for those very serious errors.
all right, well, let's see if something comes out of it in the end, because that tends to be the case. The last question I was going to ask you, Dr. Newman, it was about the future. Like, what do you do now? You know, you're not a candidate anymore. What are you going to do now? And I'm thinking that maybe you should go into consulting to help people who are trying to run for office. Since you've been through the process, you seem to know a lot about it.
Well, I appreciate you recognizing that, but being the modest person that I am, I have no intention of offering my services unless someone contacts me about and a candidate for Secretary of State who didn't make it to the final two was a very close friend of mine, and he used me as a consultant, and I provided one of these.
So you're not trying to be a paid consultant necessarily,
no,
but
no.
What's the future hold then?
That's not my call. I think that California is worth an investment of candidates and voters. I continue to do my part, as this station does, informing people about the circumstance in California that needs a great deal of attention.
All right. Thank you very much for talking with me, sir. I really appreciate you coming. Your book again, My Journey, My Stand. People can find it how?
Through Amazon.
Okay, My Journey, My Stand, Robert C. Newman II, Dr. Robert Newman. All right, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it. It was fantastic to meet you. You opened my eyes to some things, and I love learning new things when I'm interviewing people, so I really appreciate that. Thanks for being here. That's it, guys, for now. Thanks for watching CCN Crown City Network and watching CCN Sunrise, our morning talk show on here. We will see you next time.